welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings here. There, that's it. Yeah, just here. Anyway, alright, so I think I will talk a little bit about David Benatar. And certain people making certain arguments that I think are just logically disconnected. I mean, the fundamental premise is that life isn't just bad in some superficial way, that it's kind of bad in kind of a grand way. Like, the biggest bad you can get is torture, right? I mean, what else can we put on the scale? You know, there's nothing else but feelings that have value in the universe, and clearly these negative feelings are the most negative thing that we can imagine, because there's nothing else that can do something overtly bad. And do it in a way that promises more bad, I guess is another way to look at it. I mean, it's always got to be a measure of the future benefit versus the cost to the present. And logic says if you had to prevent a future of years and years and years of torture, that you would torture one person now for their benefit. I mean, the whole Jesus thing of dying for everyone else's sins kind of argument, makes sense. I mean, if you can do it that way, then you're kind of logically obligated to do it. Whether we have an obligation to force people to be logical, that is, to do the right thing, I would say, yeah, we do in certain cases. So it depends on how much value is on the table. But it's always a value equation. There's always some kind of best answer to the value question. And I don't think Benatar's answers have anything to do with those best answers, unfortunately. So he's nice, articulate, makes a good argument in some cases. But there are points where I just don't understand the disconnect. So he does assert that he's somehow animals are included in his philosophy. And it's stated in the book, like, as I read the book, he says in a clear paragraph, there's a couple of sentences saying everything I'm saying goes for the animal kingdom as well. But it's such a weak statement. It's so, it doesn't even go into the animals that we are husbanding, or whatever, versus the animals that are in nature. It doesn't get into any of the whole fact that evolution is what's driving this thing called life in the first place, that's what we're a product of. And those, I think, are really important perspective points to raise. That it's really not realistic to think this is some sort of, that this bad design is okay because God knows what he's doing and all that kind of crap. Those arguments need to be closed down as being irrational and silly as part of the premise. You just can't keep making excuses for your dumb, infinite intelligence. Why would even the Matrix people, why if we were in a Matrix, what kind of psychotic kook would put us in this stupid Matrix? This terribly imperfect, sloppy, disgusting, ugly Matrix. Why wouldn't we be in one that's fun all the time, or a larger percentage of the time, even? It's just such a bad drawing. It's such a bad maze game. So if you're going to think it's some game created by some wise man who thinks it's a good idea to make games, he wouldn't make one this stupid. Anyway, so the fact that people just want to grab onto some sort of crap as some sort of magic or bullshit as an explanation, instead of just accept the kind of turtle face facts that every little lump and every little bump and every little thing about us is constructed by a process, and it has crude purpose and function, and there's just no magic to the game. It's just this little make little survival machines, and the survival machines can get very silly. Tortoises are kind of silly. I like them, but they're kind of silly. But it's a niche, and they filled it. All right. So, so the sort of the, maybe, well, I'll get to it later, I guess. The argument from you're not really an Ephilist, and he doesn't even think there's a necessity for the word, which is silly in my opinion, just because it's clear that most people who are talking about antinatalists think it's just about this human condition thing. And well, frankly, I could just go on about the word itself, antinatalism. We have to do better than that. It's just not a good enough word. Nataling is a kind of, making baby, pet the baby kind of crap. It's not. It's not procreating. It's not. It's not the idea of. What do you call that when you want to pass on your gene thing? Anyway, genealogy or something. It's people's description or definition of the concept of what we're against or what I'm against. So clearly that's why I said, I'm going to call myself something else, because there needs to be something I can define and describe as, no, it's the whole process of DNA mutations thinking they're accomplishing something in a world that doesn't need their existence in any way whatsoever. Doesn't enhance the universe in any way, and it just creates this huge liability of creating torture that doesn't need to exist and creating happiness that doesn't need to exist. Neither one there's no deficit felt until we show up to create it and then say, ow, there's a deficit, we need to fill the deficit. So it's, we're the problem. There is no problem the existence of consciousness isn't creating. That's the simplest statement, right? There is no problem that the existence of consciousness is not creating. There's no need that exists without us being here, and there's nothing that needs to be fixed or changed or altered or in any way messed with. In any way, is there anything where, we have to do that over because it's not good enough? The universe is just fine until you put feeling things in it, and then all you have is problems that need solved, that need solutions. All right. So then the other point that Benatar gets pushed on, I could play a video of Benatar, but, I'm just, he has an accent, and I don't know if that's going to help any. So anyway, there was a new interview where he's debating with some Christians who are perfectly comfortable with the idea that their God doesn't exist. So they're really weak Christians. Not anything like an American Christian, kind of Australian Christians or something. But anyway, and so that was funny on its face, but it turned into something completely different just because the Christians weren't really arguing from a Christian perspective of a creator who would be pretty damn offended that you're having conversations about how his creation sucks. I'm pretty sure if there is a God, he's not going to like you saying, your creation sucks. Especially a God who was so concerned about being loved and appreciated. He's such an insecure God that he's not going to like that conversation at all. But anyway, so that just means ironic to think of religious people who are wishy-washy on whether God had a good idea or not. Anyway, this is beside the point. So so the guy sort of prefaced the conversation by describing antinatalism as having the purpose of extinction. And Benatar ran from that idea. Like, no, that's not what we're about at all. And frankly, I don't see it any other way. You have to be about extinction. If you're not, you're just saying, there's an abuse going on, and we'll take a little bit out of it, but we want to keep it alive as for ever and ever. It's just a silly backslide from the real purpose, which is to prevent it completely, prevent it in a real sense, not in some. Well, we're trying to prevent it. There, isn't that good enough? Trying to prevent, isn't that just as good as actually preventing? Which doesn't make any sense. So, it's basically he's arguing that first it can't be done, like somehow it's impossible. So, this argument's been around for like 3 years. People keep saying, I keep pointing out how, What do you mean it's impossible? The whole civilized world is already doing it. Japan is already in negative population growth. All the advanced countries would be in negative population growth if it wasn't for their importation of the poor, ignorant masses, the foreigners, the baby makers. So if they weren't taking in all the surplus population from the shit nations, the fact is the people who have a little bit of high school education don't do this baby thing as much. And they don't do it kind of in a dramatic way. They don't do it as much. I mean, the statistics in India, the difference between a girl who graduates high school and one who doesn't is 3 kids. The difference. Makes a huge difference. The more education you have, the less this making babies things makes a whole lot of sense to you. And the older you are, the more likely it is you're just not going to bother. And, those are right there in front of you, 50% kind of statistics. People don't just run to get married and run to have kids anymore. And the world's still talking like that's what everybody does. And it's just not a fact. It's what the dumbasses do, but people who have a little bit going for themselves in terms of a little knowledge of the world, a little understanding, they have a little bit more perspective, not only about making their own life mean something more than I raised children. They have higher ambitions for themselves. They're more interested in maybe going places and seeing museums and traveling and doing this and that. They have, instead of just being tied down to, talking baby talk to kids. So it's just a lie that human psychology has to have, we're all compelled to have children by some innate instinct. Well, it's getting kind of clear that when people are given real choices, that is, they have real alternatives in terms of choices, and they have the time to make a rational decision. They don't make the decision before they're smart enough to make it. The fact is that a lot of them, maybe even most of them, say, no, making babies ain't for me. So there's already clear evidence that it's really easy to win this war if we just educate the people that are on Earth. So if they just graduate from high school, we win. That's all we have to do. And the people that remain will breed less than replacement population, and that will lead to extinction. I mean, you don't have to stop all baby production. You just have to stop enough of it, to maintain population. So that's all you have to do. Because once it's in decline, the decline is perpetual until you change something again. So if you don't change anything, the decline is the win. We win. We won the argument. We won the circumstance. So we don't even have to make the argument, which is the irony, right? So even though none of those people know anything about antinatalism or Efilism or philosophy, whatever, they're already making the right choices. And so we have clear indication that this is an easy war to win, not a hard one to win. You just give a high school education, you already won. You're already at right on the cusp of declining population. So just giving people a high school education, you're already on the cusp of declining population. And you're all talking like it's impossible, never accomplish it, never. And then, a little bit of more high school education, another year of being a human being education clearly could get people apprehensive enough of getting in this crapshoot of, I'm going to put straws in a kid's pocket, and force him to live because I wanted to play some straw game. Not because the game had to be played, but because, I wanted to play it. The kid didn't need to play it. There was no need, that he had to fill. He didn't show up to fill a need except yours. You're the idiot making the decision to say, I want. I think it's a good idea that I have children. Even if they rephrase it, it's, what do you mean? It's a good idea how? Through what logic is it a good idea? Who's getting off on it? Anyway, so Benatar's defeatism of the goal just seems amazing in the context of, what the civilized world has already demonstrated, that this isn't all that complicated, that you can overcome this drive or this need to procreate with just a little tiny bit of education. Give somebody a good job and some kind of prospects for the future, and they don't feel this need. Now, if we took away the subsidies also for all of this baby making, instead of rewarding it, we actually made them pay the freight for their stupid decision. If they want to get into this game, we'll let them pay for its education. Let them pay for all these expenses the government pays for. Make them pay the real freight. Don't give them this license to torture. At least don't subsidize it. And then I would argue that the next step would be to actually discourage it with, active policy. So this is all well within reach. I mean, these are all doable things. I mean, coming up with a social policy that does impose, that gives people more welfare for the fewer kids they have, those kind of things, those are all doable. So that's more addressing the fact that the poor people, we have to do something about the poor, ignorant slobs who are making a mess of the world. They're the breeders. They're a blight to every part of society. I mean, they're an economic disaster, huge liabilities. Just it's a bad thing, poor people. So we have to do everything possible to get rid of them, to stop, encourage them to exist and to breed. And so there should be social policy that tells people you can't. You have to get a license. This isn't something you get to do and make a mess and force us to keep cleaning it up. And that seems within rational reach as a social policy also, because as more and more people become more invested in having a more interesting life than raising children, maybe they'll realize this is a huge expense, a huge tax liability. They're getting killed by these poor people. They're suffocating their capacity to do the experiments they want to do or the things they want to do. They can't have as nice as stuff because they got to pay for poor people to have kids. It's a blight on progress. Now it does create surpluses in labor and does some other things that you might benefit from, but if you're a civilization, you shouldn't want to be benefiting from that crap anyway. So, and now that we have the technology to allow automation to really enhance our lives, for automation to be the slave, the painless victim, that's what we should be exploiting and living better and all of that crap, and just get out of this whole bullshit that somehow we need the rich and the poor to survive. We don't need the rich and the poor. They're both huge blights on existence. But anyway, it's just this idea that get people interested in thinking things rather than snot-nose wiping, baby talkers, and the problem is solved. And it's a very small perceptual difficulty, is just imagining, yes, I live out my life in a nice, graceful, and intelligent manner, and then we understand that all these animals are trapped in their ignorance. They can't get out of the maze. We have the intelligence to climb up, see that the maze is really badly designed. It's a death trap. It's literally this rickety roller coaster. And we're just going to be the last riders. And then we're going to close the carnival. We're going to do one of those implosion things you see on TV. The old crappy building is going to be, done for. And finish sanitizing the rest of the world to just end this blight of animals being tortured. Again, for that one turtle, 10,000 little turtles have to die. For that one. You get one, you kill 10,000. That's a ratio. It's a nobody reasonable thinks that's a good idea. Nobody has any kind of empathy or capacity to internalize for themselves. Would I want to be part of that racket? Would I want to be born something that has a 1 in 10,000 chance of reaching maturity? I mean, I have to 10,000 times, I have to die badly to have one relationship that works out. You want to have 10,000 divorces before you finally have a relationship where she doesn't make you insane, kind of thing? I mean, who would say yes? Nobody who wouldn't be certifiably insane. So anyway, so Benatar is just so weak on this argument, as if, and then even taking a step further, let's say he has some sort of ethics notion that other people are entitled to their opinion. So he believes it's abuse. He'll say it, almost, technically. And yet this kind of child abuse is okay. He would pass laws against overtly punching a kid in the face, maybe, and breaking its jaw. Maybe he'd say that's too. I mean, I think he does think beating kids is okay. But anyway, just to go with the extreme, he would say there should be laws against these overt violences portrayed against children. But somehow he says we are not allowed to pass laws against the act itself, the motivation for the act, or everything that leads up to that act. Even though you know it to be an abuse, in the sense that the person is using the child to satisfy their needs. They're exploiting it. So it's clearly an exploitation. It's no better than child slavery. It's no better than all the other things he thinks it's okay to pass laws against. And yet he'll say, no, we can't possibly ever go there. We can't go there where we tell people they can't do it. Of course we could tell people they can't do it. If you believe it's abuse, you're required to tell people they can't do it. Just like you're required to tell people they can't rape and they can't pillage and they can't do all these other negative, violent things in life, because this is just as much an act of exploitation. It's just as much an act, a crime against the dignity and rights of the unborn, the non-existent, to remain where they are unless you can drag them to something you know to be a better condition than nothing. So unless you're certain, and you can't be, you have no rational justification in being certain, so we can declare that insane. If you think you're certain my kid will be okay, your certainty is made out of nonsense, and you're crazy. It's just a fact. So if you're not even accounting for the risk, so he knows the risk is real, he knows the risk can be logically defended as being unavoidable. You cannot possibly avoid the risk. So the exploitation will take place, and it's just as much an abuse as just punching the kid in the face. There's no difference. Yet he's trying to make some sort of philosophical difference. There's no difference. The molester, most molesters of children are not trying to hurt the children, right? They're just trying to satisfy their needs. They're not trying to do any damage. They always want to portray them as they somehow they need to kill kids, or they need to, break them in half, or they need to do some kind of silly violence. No. The vast majority of them just want to get off. They just want to satisfy their needs, and they don't want to do it in any kind of harmful way, and they'd love it if they can do it all in Candyland somewhere, or at the fun park, or in some kind of fun way. They have absolutely no interest in causing harm. But we know they are, so they're just not allowed to do what they want to do, okay? So even though they have all these good intentions, I just want to love, Michael Jackson kind of example. The fact is that we know this is a danger. You're putting children at risk of having their whole sexual identity warped and twisted by this event, because it's inappropriate and in the wrong place at the wrong time and in the wrong way, and it's not engineered to create somebody who's going to be able to live in the world and gain their gratification in some sort of normal way. So we know it's a harm. Can't say what kind it is, because we don't know what it's going to do to somebody. Some people are just fine after being molested. Some women are fine after being raped. Some are catastrophically ruined for the rest of their life. That's just the facts of the circumstance. And because you can't predict the outcome, you have no right to impose the I want bullshit on them. So anyway, he can understand. Benatar's smart enough to understand these kind of arguments, that it doesn't matter that people's procreative intent is natural, or that it's good intended in some silly way. He knows overtly that the harm that it will cause, and that it has potential to cause great harm. So it's not that it has, that it's a benign stub toe kind of thing that they're imposing. They're potentially imposing substantial great harm, Siamese twinnyism or something. Some kind of really horrid event will potentially happen to that child, and it's a tragedy that should be prevented, and it can be most easily prevented at the source. And so this is just an irrationally hypocritical argument. If you believe in any laws on abusive behavior, then you have to believe in this law, that it's perfectly right, perfectly sensible. If the majority realizes that procreation is too dangerous for people to involve themselves in, then why shouldn't the majority pass a law telling the ignorant masses they're not allowed to keep playing that stupid game anymore? There's every right to do it. So there's just nothing logical in what he thinks are these taboos or barriers against completing the job, finishing it. So the other part of that is this, again, measuring current against future harm. So he makes some stupid abortion argument. So even if I believe there's no rational reason to think a human fetus is at any point sentient in any kind of appreciably sensible way. There's naturally no function for their sentience. Since sentience is about reward and punishment, and they're too stupid to be rewarded and punished. They're not forming memories. They're not creating symbolisms and representations. They're not doing any of the things that you need to feel pain, that feeling pain and pleasure makes possible for you to assign value. They're not able to assign value yet because they don't have a vocabulary. They don't even have a mechanical mechanism to attach things to, so the feeling wouldn't be of any value. Then they're physically incapable of doing anything, so what the hell point would there be? It's like having plants that, when they catch fire, they feel pain and they what? They can't scream, they can't run away, they can't do anything. So what the hell purpose does the pain have? They can't act on the learned. Well, I guess I should run away next time there's a fire. Oh, wait a minute, I can't run away anytime when there's a fire. I can't do anything. So what's the point of me being tortured? They're not in the reward and punishment game. There's nothing for them to learn, okay, because they have nothing to do. They don't make choices. They don't have choices to make, decisions to make. So anyway, so he makes an argument about how, measuring these trade-offs, like so a woman could be in some circumstance where her welfare of wanting her baby could be more important than, taking the right, imposing on her by forcing her to have abortion would be more pain-causing than the risk you're imposing on the baby. Of course it can't be. And one of them's an innocent party versus an uninnocent party. One of them didn't need to get pregnant in the first place, and never took responsibility, and so there should be more liable than the one who didn't do anything. So, it's another stupid equation where it doesn't make any sense. And we know that once the baby is in the world, the risk expands in the sense that that kid could end up having 10 kids and create even more harm and even more potential for damage. So there would never be an equation where the advice of the smart wouldn't be, no, you have the abortion. The last thing you do is have the baby. First, you risk dying. You risk a lot of things before you have the baby. Because you're guilty, it's innocent, and you just don't have a right to be an imposer. And that's it. There's not, oh yeah, it's okay to commit some little rapes. No, you don't get to do any of that crap. So that even is it's annoying in the beginning that he would first have this perception that fetal consciousness would be at any state where it could possibly be worth making an argument. Clearly the animals in all these torture chambers and these, the concentration camps that we have the animals in, clearly all of those animals are clearly sentient, clearly capable, and capable on a level so much more mature than a human fetus. And it's just ridiculous if he's going to make these arguments not to be first making powerful arguments against eating meat and saying we should pass laws against that and all this other stuff, because it just doesn't make any proportional sense. You're going to protect the psychology of some woman versus torturing sentient organisms. There's no competition between those two values. If you're going to be honest and not be a hypocrite. So he's clearly very human-centric, very human-occupied in his focus, and he really doesn't get the whole from nature argument. He doesn't get, I don't think he sincerely believes that the world those animals are living in is just as real as ours. It just doesn't have a lot of mathematics in it, But other than that, their living experience is just as real as our living experience, just as meaningful. Their pain is just as real, and their pleasure is just as real, and just as powerful, maybe even more powerful, a motivator. And it's just a lie to pretend that somehow the emotional stability of a human is somehow worth more than their overt torture. That's a silly, stupid argument. Alright, so maybe I'll take a break and I'll be back. Yeah, as I can. Alright, more. So just this whole attitude that Benatar projects of this kind of benign philosophy, as if this is some sort of clinical conversation that doesn't really have anything to do with reality and theoretical conversation, maybe is a better word. I know there's another word for it, abstract, it's not real, just figuratively speaking kind of bullshit. And then you can see where you're allowed to be quite illogical in those circumstances where you don't put it into the real world and put it into the real circumstance of actually doing what you want to do, which is real prevention. So it's almost like this idea that, oh well, poor people aren't to blame and they shouldn't be punished, and yes, all those things are true, but the practical fact is if you feed them and give them guns, they'll be a menace. It's just a fact. Okay, so if you give them the capacity to make more of a mess, they will. So if you actually want to prevent starvation, you don't do it by feeding the hungry. It doesn't solve the problem, it makes the problem worse. And so those are practical realities that have to be the framework for a conversation about how what the law should be. So anyway, so he's very he wants to run away from any statement that anti-natalists wish to impose on the current perpetrators in any way. Like they're going to go out and start arresting the rapists and stuff. No, they're just not rapists themselves. They do their little vegan thing and their little oh, life is bad thing, and leave it at that. And frankly, that's not going to fix the problem. That's not going to do the job. I mean, like I said, I don't want to be a hypocrite about it. In a way, we don't have to do anything but stop the ignorant poor. If you stop them, world population declines. It's just a fact. The game is over. So if you can abolish ignorance breeding ignorance, in the sense of poverty, creating impoverished minds that can't figure out something better to do with their life, or think their life is over when they're 16 and start making decisions about, I'm a very good procreator, I know how to be a parent, sure you do. So that's another conversation that should be had with people, is about their gross incompetence. I mean, even a smart person is going to have a hard time anticipating all the nuance that there is to raising a child. Not a simple thing. It's not like cutting your grass or something. It's something that's very delicate. You can turn your kid into a perpetrator, a predator, or you can turn your kid into prey. Two very negative things. You want to avoid that. You want to have you want to raise something that's civilized and decent and productive and all these good things. And it's not that simple. You just don't pop the thing into the world and it turns out all right. So this, in the first place, is a little more complicated even than driving. You have to know what a stop sign is. You have to know how heavy your car is and how well the tires grab onto the road. And there's lots of physical facts to understand. And so people who understand those physical facts become stunt drivers and tilt the car sideways, can do all kinds of fancy things because they understand. They understand some of the mechanisms. But they're not immune to failing either, because it's hard and it's difficult and it's not easy to do. And so that should be something Benatar is capable of saying is right there. For that reason alone, parenting should be in some sort of category where this isn't unskilled labor. This isn't you need to come to, you have to file your application and you have to have some sort of skills that create some sort of reason to believe that you can do this. that you're competent to perform this job. The job isn't nothing. The job is really complicated. Lots of clear places where you can make gross mistakes that ruin the recipe, that destroy, that poison it, that you just made a huge mess. You can destroy it. And there's no conversation. Like, this is one of the obligations of civilization, is to make sure it doesn't let people who don't know how to drive. And just like it doesn't let people who don't know how to, control the valves or the pressure tanks at the refinery do the job. I mean, the whole point is to engineer a system that can work, not a system that's guaranteed to fail. And it's guaranteed to fail if you don't say there should be minimums for these basic functions. You should have a minimum standard of competence. There should be some hope that I'm a very good driver. I'm a very good parent. Well, what's the hope? Where have you done it before? Where have you shown how you're competent? You have all this competence you derived. When all your competence is going to be is, well, I'm not going to be like my stupid parents. I'll just be the opposite of them, and that'll win. Some sort of horse shit like that. Because the fact is, kids don't raise themselves. And the fact is you can turn them into all kinds of monsters. And it's just a fact. And so it's a huge responsibility. And yet he doesn't think that's something we should legislate or have conversation about, or we should, look at people sideways and say, who the fuck are you to think you can have a kid? That maybe we should have billboards that sort of spell that out. Where the fuck did you get your degree in child rearing? Well, how do you think you're a responsible little Frankenstein? You didn't even go to medical school. At least Frankenstein had some hope, right? I mean, he went to medical school. He was a doctor. He knew how to do some stuff. These Frankensteins have no clue whatsoever. And yet they're going to take on this huge responsibility, this terribly precious thing that's going to be involved. They could make a psycho killer that's going to cause tremendous harm in the world, a greedy scumbag who's going to steal money from old people. They can create all kinds of monsters. Huge responsibility. We can't have that conversation. Of course we can have the conversation. Of course the people with a little bit of education, a little bit of sophistication, a little bit of decency should tell the indecent, you're not allowed to be indecent. You have to, if you're not going to play along and be part of a civilization, then maybe we should just squish you. 3 stupid statements and you're out. Vote for Trump and you're out. Shit. Anyway, just, no reason not to recognize that there's minimum standards to people's right to be an arrogant asshole. You can't walk around pretending you're a doctor. You can't pretend you're a cop. You can't pretend you're a lot of things. Why should we allow people to pretend they know what they're fucking doing when they're having kids, when they don't? So even the conversation, I think, would control a lot of the behavior, but the exact opposite conversation is what the public ends up financing, is a bunch of placating and a bunch of support mechanisms and other kinds of crap. So instead of forcing the people to recognize they're incompetent, you pretend that somehow it takes a village to raise a child, or some other kind of horseshit, that somehow it's a village responsibility. Like somehow the village knows how to do it. No, the village doesn't know how to do it either. Those public employees, they're not qualified either. They don't know anything about all this psycho crap. They think, the kid at 12 years old, he once said, gee, it's kind of fun wearing a dress, and therefore he's a girl. It's completely irrational in terms of knowing anything about psychology or what is indicative of anything. I mean, just nonsense, just silly reactions. Every time something dies, we have to have grief counseling because we somehow don't know things die. It's just an amazingly silly pile of mush. So none of these people have any. It's almost something that should just be declared right on its face. There's nobody competent to raise children because there's too many variables and everybody's fucking clueless regarding which ones will build character and which ones will destroy character. And that's the problem, right? It's all a balance. Only so much burden on a kid makes the kid have more integrity, right? Too much burden and you turn them into a psycho. Make them too poor, they want to get too rich. Make them too rich, they're too fucking lazy. I mean, you give them too much, then they don't know how to do anything. You give them too little, then they're broken before they're 21. It's way too complicated for anybody to be getting in this silly game. And those are conversations that are hardly offend in any reasonable way. It's perfectly sensible for people who believe in responsibility and decency and all that stuff to shove that right in the face of all of us, that there's lots of shit we're doing that we're not competent to do, and we have no right to do it if we don't know how to do it. That's the first reason why you don't have a right. I mean, the foundational kernel reason is you don't have a right because you're imposing. But even if you don't get the argument from imposition, you should be able to get the argument from incompetence, because it's so fucking overtly right in your face that unless again, these delusional people who believe they have magic powers and I have a crystal and the crystal will tell me what to do, and I have a magic 8-ball and it'll protect me from making a bad decision. I mean, those people should just be squished. So, all right. So, summing up, we'll do that. Benatar is weak on anti-natalist. He's weak anti-natalist. The way to say it, weak atheism. The agnostics. I'm confused. I can't. Fairy tales. It could be true. Yeah. Where? In what universe would that be true, where fairy tales are true? But anyway, so yeah, he's just kind of a weak anti-natalist. And he's certainly a weak advocate for the trillions of sentient beings trapped in the natural maze of carnage, where the odds are 10,000 to 1 against, where the brutality is insanely high, and every day just murder. It's all over the place. It's all bloody swords all over the place. I mean, the swords are right on their hands, built in. I mean, it's so bad. And, he's not panicking. He's, so what? That can go on forever, and it doesn't faze me very much. Sorry, he doesn't get it then. I guess the thing I was thinking today is just different ways of showing, exposing the hypocrisy of these life lovers. And, we almost should make all those horrible game shows that could be made, we should make them legal. The ones where you'd pay the guy, a simple thing. Like you could just say you could win $100,000. Don't even make it that much money, right? Don't even have to make it $1 million. You could win $100,000 and you roll up a set of dice, okay, with 100 to 1 odds. So, you just put a skull and crossbone on, 2 dice out of 10 dice. And so there's 100 to 1 odds of you rolling to the skulls. So it's almost like this coronavirus thing, everybody. There's good reason to want to slow it down, to prevent how fast it spreads, because nobody's immune to it. Good reason, because the healthcare system couldn't handle it and all this rest of this crap. But the fact is that, it might be before there's a viable vaccine, half the population might have to get it. So it's going to happen, So, do the rational things, not the irrational ones, Like, don't close something until somebody's actually been exposed to the virus, for example. Anyway, a whole different subject. But anyway, so you have 100 to 1 odds, and it's, you roll the dice and you win $100,000. But if you get this, so the chances are you have a 99 chance of winning the 100,000 and a 1 chance of being killed. So that would be the game show. You die, in 10 days or something. We get to shoot you. And there'd be people. I would do it, right? Lots of people would grab those dice and say, yeah, give me a roll. I feel lucky. Okay, so the fact is we have contempt for our life. We could show that most people have contempt for life. They'll risk it, for these trivial things like a better lifestyle and all that kind of crap. So this whole pretense that it's some sort of a sacred thing, you could show how it's not sacred, and you sort of see that in what people do, right? I mean, the whatever it is, the X version of boxing, where they knock each other's teeth out, do all kinds of, clearly humans are really stupid and they're full of shit, and they really don't value anything except their own advancement and their own fairy tale. They have a little fairy tale they've written about them. There's a little book called, Run, Spot, Run, and it's not just Spot. They have their own name in the book. And they don't want they want the Run, Spot, Run book to mean something. It's a meaningful little book. Even though there's 7 billion of these stupid books where every person thinks they're the center of a fascinating story, they're all shit. They're all stupid Run, Spot, Run books. There's nothing magical about these adventure you're on and how you think you're getting somewhere, you're accomplishing something and all this bullshit. It's just bullshit. It's your little fairy tale, and it can't mean anything to anybody else, and it certainly can't mean anything to anybody intelligent, because anybody intelligent knows you're just whoring. You're just after some sort of, make my penis bigger thing or some whatever. You're just after some sort of ego boost thing that'll make you feel like you did something with your stupid life. And so it's just a little private narrative. There's no library. That book would go on the shelf and everybody'd say, oh, I have to go get that book. It's such a fascinating, great book. No, your story sucks. And it's made out of just very base and silly notions of you being loved, you being appreciated, you being admired. You're just voguing, look at me. I have a life. I'm alive. I'm meaningful. I'm doing interesting things. To you. Okay, and that's it. And once intelligent people realize that, they still can vogue. They can still want. They can still think their story is fun. But they know it's bullshit. They know it's not a story anybody else is going to read. Some old lady sitting there doing her crocheting. She's. You want to read the old lady crocheting book? I don't think so. You want to see the movie running in her head? It's not fascinating. And you certainly don't want to see it when it's undressed. But anyway, all right. So I think whatever. I think the ball went forward anyway. I don't know if I kicked it very hard, but it went in the right direction, and so that's my job. Just add a little more momentum to the wrecking ball. I blew in the right direction. So till the next time when I try to do a little better than that and such. I continue to try to do better in spite of my, like I said, this thing's hard. Life is difficult. It's work. It's work arguing. It's work figuring out, well, who am I talking to and how do I be sensitive to their narrative and blah, blah, blah. How do I invade their mind and be able to manipulate the little squares so they can see the truth. All right, that torture is bad, okay? Shit. Yeah. Well, anyway, I'll endeavor to persevere and be more productive, or however it goes. I used to be able to do this. I guess I have to do it with this crippled hand. Yeah, there it is. Don't take any wooden nickels. But anyway, till the next time, such.